Welcome to Mini Projects. In this part of the training and in these upcoming lessons, we will tackle a specific task that has been presented to us, which we will have to resolve and build appropriate setup, really to meet what client or technical director wants from us. If you will be working professionally with MoGraph in some sort of a production environment, this will probably be your daily routine. So let's now do something with all that accumulated knowledge from previous lessons and put it to good use. Do note that we will concentrate more on technical and functional side of things, so don't really expect fancy texturing or highly detailed models or stuff like that. That is not the point of these projects. The point is to teach you how to build complex setups from which you can build upon and meet MoGraph in its full power. The benefit of this approach is that I will be able to show you far more setups using this method instead of creating some highly detailed scenes. Being a 3D artist is not just the ability to create nice things and setup. It's also about adopting some really good workflow and preparation habits. So whenever you start a project, first draft it on a piece of paper, or if you have another means of drafting, for example, you could use a doodle tool for drafting, and I will use it also as a helper to explain what I have in mind for a particular setup. What is also worth mentioning is that the pace in these projects will pick up slightly, so I will not waste time explaining what you should know by now, and if you find this difficult to follow, go back to previous lessons. If you will not feel comfortable after that, or you haven't watched previous volumes, I highly recommend you watch them to be able to follow. Now let's go with our first project. For our first task, I decided to do something that is really common, and I'm sure you will find quite a few good uses for that. So the first thing we want to do is a card dealing setup. I will get my doodle tool and maybe I will change the color to maybe this one, and we'll sketch what I want to achieve. So let's say I want to have maybe a deck of cards like this. So really just approximating things, and I want to be able to transfer them to, let's say, this new arrangement. So basically I would like to texture the cards, so I want to give them the front and the back face, so the real deal, and I want these cards from the deck to fly to their new position. So it's some sort of a dealing action, so they arrange like this on our arbitrary spline or whatever we will use for that setup. Also, I want the ability to fold these cards, so maybe I want to fold them like this, or maybe fold them back to a complete deck. I also want the ability to move that deck in any of this direction. So really, to simplify, a deck of cards, and I will be dealing them to another location, and I want all that in between. I want them to fly and roll over and show their face. So this will be the back face, and they will fly and rotate and show the actual card like this. So really nice setup that will help you understand some principles we talked about in previous lessons. Okay, so let's get rid of this doodle guy. We know what we have to do, and let's start. The very first thing we will do is actually to create our card, because it's obvious you cannot really do anything without it. So always do what you cannot live without. So in this case, or in case of any setup, you need a card, you need a geometry. So start with the things that are absolutely necessary, and even if you don't know how you will create a setup, the things could be a little bit clearer once you create a few objects or parts of the scene that are really necessary for the setup in mind to function. So This card should be a little bit more narrow, so let's try 70. That would be good, and I'll set the orientation to Y minus. And I did that because I know that I will be using this side as a back face and the side underneath as a face, so I really don't have to flip the setup. It will be much more understandable later, so let's proceed. And of course, you're already guessing, we will create a cloner object for our card, and I believe in standard deck there is 52 cards, so let's enter 52, and this position gap between them is really high, so let's try 1. That is also high. Let's try 0.5, maybe even a bit more, 0.3, and I'll just enable Courage shading lines. You can see how it can help you distinguish the geometry, so I think this would pretty much work. And now it's time for us to texture these cards. I prepared cards for this specific setup, and those cards are actually series of 52 images plus 1 for the back face. We will load the cards with the multi-shader, and you will see that multi-shader has a great feature here that says add from folder. That is exactly what we are going to do, so we don't have to add everything manually. So I will quickly navigate to my image folder, and once I found my folder which contains all the images, I will press OK. This InnoVD will ask me if the chosen files are not in the search path and if I want to copy them on the project location. In this case I will say no, and you can see that those images are actually just plain simple images. You see it loaded all the cards necessary for our setup. Okay, here is the back face card, and actually I will remove it and will load that one separately as another material. Now, if I apply this material to a cloner, you will see what happens, and let me just demonstrate to you. If I enable this offset, we have a problem because every single card is the same card, and you will probably want something different unless you really like the 8 of hearts. And you'll also notice that it gave that image value to both sides. I would actually just want to use a front side, and you can see now that what I was doing at the beginning with this polygon object, with this orientation minus y, really makes sense. So now the front face is this bottom one. I hope that makes sense. So to resolve the issue we have with cards, we have to enable another mode for this multi-shader, and this mode is index ratio. So now you see the cards changed, and if you play a bit with this offset, you can see that all these cards are now available. So that's pretty neat. Okay, so let's zero this out. We can right click on this guy, and I will frame the scene, rotate it a bit, and what I want to do, I want to create another material, and maybe it's a good idea to rename this one cards. This would be back face, so not to lose track of things, especially in complex scenes. Maybe I will scale this window down because I'm really constrained with the window size of this recording. So let's load here that image, and that image is found here. So open, and same question, no, and the card is loaded. Now I will apply the backface material also to the cloner, but you see we have the same problem. It textures the both sides. So for this guy, I'll just go with the back side. So now we have cards textured properly. So we have all the 52 cards as faces, but we only have a single card, or better to say a single image, as a back face value. I hope you can see that, and I hope that really makes sense. So if I would load a multi-shader here with different values, I could also use different images for all 52 clones. So now it's applying this image to all 52 clones. I hope that makes sense, and we can continue. So now when we have those cards, let's actually create a new position for them, and for that I will use a spline, and in this case I will use the arc spline, and I want the half circle, so let's go 180, and we will put it to be on X, Z, and actually let's go from 180 to 360. That will give us this arc on this side. So maybe I will increase this to maybe 300, a little bit bigger, so have some spacing between cards. Now many of you would think I would use a spline effector here, but in this situation this is rather limited, and I would actually rather use a matrix object. So let's create a matrix object, and we will create position information for these cards on this spline with our matrix object. So we will put the mode to object, load the arc spline here, and we now have position information for our cards. Now I will set this count of these matrices, this newly formed information, also to 52, so we have exactly the same number as for the cards. We can go with even here, so even distribution, and here under transform I will maybe, let's set the color here something nice, so it's not really gray and boring. And as you know, these guys won't render unless they're in this color mode, so now they will render. So this can be also a little bit helpful if you are aiming for something specific, but I really just wanted to create some color information to make this scene more alive. So now for the transfer I will use an inheritance effector. So this cloner has to inherit the position, scale and rotation, so transformation values of this matrix, and can morph it directly. So if I enable this guy, you'll see those cards are morphed into place of that newly formed matrices. The problem is that cards are not oriented correctly. So under matrix, under transform, I think that would be P, no, that would be H. So I will rotate them for 90 degrees, so they're nicely oriented as they should be. And if I play with this strength value, I'm actually transferring the cards. Now, this is not really something to write home about, but it's a start. So you're always building things in this way. You're planning, sketching, roughing out, blocking out, and then refining. Now, since I will be playing with this strength a lot to check how things are transferring, I would actually load this to HUD. So I believe you cannot see that because the screen is cut off. So I'm doing a right click, add to HUD command. I will drag it here, do a show always, and maybe get rid of this object name, because I will know this strength is strength, and I can rename it deal. Okay, so it would be really nice. So I'm dealing. I will actually use something different for dealing, but I think this is a great opportunity to show you how you can rename these guys and help yourself with these HUD gizmos in the viewport. Now, the first thing that is bothering me is that this transition is not really gradual. The cards should fly a little bit differently to their newly formed location. So I'm really looking to achieve a different effect, and for that I'll use a fall off. So let's go with sphere, and if I pull this guy upwards, you will see something happening. The transfer will only occur once those guys are in the reach of this fall off. So actually reset this spline, and this will give me better results. So now I'm really experimenting. Notice that the dealing is set to 100%, so inheritance is active. Now if I lower this guy, let's try 10 and see if we have better results. Yes, we do, much better, and would even go with 5. So this is really nice. I'm really satisfied with the effect. So I'm actually using a fall off to start off the dealing. So how about that? That's really nice. One thing that you may have noticed is that these cards are somewhat intersecting. So I will use a step effector just to give it a little bit of a spacing. You can see this is not what we want. We will turn off the scale and we'll enable only position. So let's go with maybe 2 centimeters. I think this would be good enough. So let's now try to deal these guys once again. So this is much better. So they're really not intersecting, and notice how these guys are not intersecting, and these at the end are intersecting just a little bit, and the reason for it is this spline. So currently it has a tiny bit of easing to it. So if I reset this to 0, so this will be a linear spline without easing, watch the result. Watch how there is no intersection no more. So you have to be aware of all these little things to be able to successfully use MoGraph. So we are refining as we go. So now we solved the problem of intersecting cards at the end, but watch in the beginning, watch how these cards now are intersecting, and that is what we don't want. And this is actually a great opportunity for us to use weighting in the effector. So first I will set this inheritance to have an infinite fall off. So that will give us the result where all cards are on their new positions. So this leaves the inheritance active, but we will trigger it by another effector which weighting value will be used. So I will add a plane effector, and do note that you have to add the plane effector now to a cloner. So I think that is logical enough because that removal of intersection, relatively speaking, should happen on this stack of cards, which is actually a cloner state, not the new inherited state of this matrix object. I really hope I haven't complicated things too much. So let's add a plane effector, and you can see all the cards are pushed down only by this value. So first thing to do is to set the weight of this inheritance to 0. So now it will be controlled by another effector. Now we will add some fall off to our plane effector. So let's go with the spherical one, and you can see what that does, and maybe we will play with some values. But first I will set the weight transform to 100%. That means it will drive the inheritance effector weight. So if I will do something now, it should deal the cards, but it doesn't, and this is the priority issue. So in the cloner, under effectors, you have to put the plane effector before the inheritance. So basically this is a situation where this guy, this inheritance, has to know what the plane effector is doing. So if I change the order, and you see how you really have to be aware of those things, and play with this, now you'll see I'm actually dealing the cards properly, so to speak. I can change some values here, so maybe enter a -100, so we get a little bit of the overshoot of these cards, and have a go, and that's much better. And also under fall off, if I remember correctly, 5% was good enough. I can reset this spline also. So now, hopefully, this will be a much better. So you can see that this dealing is much more natural than what we had before. And that looks really good. And I'll just play a bit with this value for step effector just to fix this intersection problems. Let's go with maybe 6 would be good enough. And I'll turn off this loop option just to get rid of these problems with the end cards. So like this, I hope you can see the change. And the settings inside this matrix object will now give us the opportunity to do all that what we had initially in mind. So I can really fold the cards by setting both of these guys to 50%. So like this. And one little problem that you might face is the thickness of the deck, but you can compensate that with this scale value. So let's try 2, maybe even 3. This would be good enough. So that is really great. Let's show how you can offset the deck. So this is what we were looking for, and you can really shuffle the cards, and you can even shuffle the texture. So here under parameter, this U transform will now be a little bit more clear. So watch what happens if I play with this value. So it's simply shuffling the texture in the U direction. So really hope that makes sense. So this is the card dealing. I hope you like it. You can expand on this setup and really experiment with various settings and effectors. So probably what most of you would try is maybe to add a, let's say, maybe a delay effector. So you would really get a little bit more of a natural motion. And I would set this to even. And to see the effect, you have to press play. So now it should feel a little bit more natural with some sort of lag. I hope you can see that. So let's even try to increase this to maybe 75. The effect will be more pronounced. So you can see how it somehow lags behind. You could try different options here under delay effector, maybe spring, which would really not be suitable, but you can do that. So something like this. So the cards are really behaving crazy. Let's tune down the strength to 50%. So something like this. You would get really crazy results with playing with those guys. Let's go with 50% here and play with the plane effector. So it's really some sort of dealing like on a dynamic spline or something like that. Okay, that was the card dealing. Let's go to our next project.